Can the New York Giants stand toe-to-toe with the Philadelphia Eagles, or will the Eagles clinch a playoff berth? Gino Cammilleri, co-host of LockedOn Eagles, and I are breaking it down for you coming up next on a special crossover edition of the LockedOn Giants-LockedOn Eagles podcast next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Crossover Thursday is presented by our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is so much fun and it's easy to play. There's no competing with other players. It's just you versus the projections available. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 10 times the amount of your money on your entry. It can literally take less than 60 seconds to enter. It's that easy. We love Prize Picks, and we know you will too. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Crossover Thursday between the New York Giants and the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm Patricia Traina, host of the Locked On Giants podcast, joined by Gino Cammilleri, co-host of the Locked On Eagles podcast. And unlike the Giants-Eagles rivalry, Gino and I, we get along. We have a friendly discussion. And Gino, it's going to be a good discussion tonight as we break down for everybody the key stories, the key matchups, and we make predictions, which I have a feeling you and I are going to be in sync on the predictions.
I hope so. I have a good feeling about this one. And as always, Patricia, it is great to be back doing these crossover Thursdays with you. And it's great that we're sitting here in the NFC East, which is arguably the best division in football right now. Over the last couple of years, you and I have had some discussions where both of these teams are under 5 wins, and we're just struggling to get a team into the playoffs that has 7 or 8 wins. And now we're saying the best team in the NFC East might be the best team in football. And the 3 best teams in the NFC besides the Philadelphia Eagles could also be in the NFC East as well. It's surreal the level of football that this division is playing right now. And the last 5 weeks, the Eagles see 3 division opponents. We'll be seeing you guys twice. We got the Dallas Cowboys on Christmas Eve. This is not going to be an easy stretch. This is one where it's going to be physical, tough football. I don't think this game is going to be a blowout like we saw last week. It's going to be very close, in my opinion. You can never write these NFC East games off, especially against the Giants, who, coming off of that tie, you got out without taking a loss. That team needs to win. That's a bad, dangerous place for the Philadelphia Eagles to be playing this team. I believe the Giants will come in hungry and ready to go, but I have to believe the Eagles will be just as hungry and ready to go as well.
And I echo your sentiments about the NFC East. Wasn't it just last year we were saying NFC least?
Yep.
We were calling the division
beast.
NFC least. And now the best record, you take the 4 teams' records combined, it's the best in football, the beast of the East. It is back, long overdue. It's exciting. And there's a possibility that, at least 3 teams can come, will be in the playoffs from the NFC East, depending on how these next few weeks go. And, let's talk about the key storylines for this weekend's matchup. You mentioned the Giants and you think that they're going to be hungry and everything like that. That's actually a storyline that I wanted to start off with. Not so much that, the hunger there, but my big thing with the Giants is after that Washington game, that 2020 tie on Sunday, the locker room acted as though it had lost. It was very deflated. It seemed like, every player you talked to was like, gosh, we put in all this preparation. We were so, we had it in our grasp and we let it slip away. To them, it felt like a loss. And I've never seen the team so despondent, or this team, I should say, so despondent after a game. It wasn't a loss. It wasn't a win. It was a tie. But it might as well have been a loss. It might as well have been a bad loss. And my big question coming into this week was, how would the Giants respond to that? Would they come out swinging and slugging? We talk about Philly week, in the media. It's like, oh, it's Philly week. It's going to be exciting. And it usually is for us. But How is it for the players? And the players, Brian Dable, his message to the players, win or lose every week. Guys, keep it consistent. Look at what we have on the plate today. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will work itself out. Don't look ahead. Don't look back. Focus on the now, what you can control, because you can't go back, obviously, and redo what happened on Sunday or on Monday or on Tuesday for that matter. Focus on the now. So the real question here for me is, can the Giants do that? Remember, they are in a mini slump of sorts. They haven't won a game in almost a month. So, it's very easy for that to slip away and for that feeling to come back, that, oh no, here we go again feeling to come back. Can the Giants show resiliency in overcoming that adversity? That to me is the big storyline for New York.
I think that's a very good way to set up how I am feeling about the Philadelphia Eagles. And this has been a sentiment that Lou and I have shared on our show over the last 4 years or so after that Super Bowl season. The Philadelphia Eagles haven't always made it through adversity in the best circumstances. There's been times, and the Tennessee Titans game back in 2018 was exactly one of them, where they have this team, they're up 2 scores in the fourth quarter, they allow them to creep back in, and they end up losing a game in overtime. And that was the message of the Eagles and what they were for the last 4 years. They were a team that they'll show up in some games, but if they have to play a true top opponent, they're more than likely going to slip up when it matters. Now, this team wins games no matter what. If it's a shootout, if you have to play 60 minutes of defensive football, if you're playing a top team, if you're playing a bottom tier team, they just find a way to win. The only slip up that they had against Washington, the best thing that could have happened to them, in my opinion, because after that game, they go out there against Indy. Things are going awry. It's not the game you would have expected. Boom, they come out on top. Jalen Hurts closes it out in that fourth quarter. The next week, you go out. Jalen Hurts has to have a shootout with Aaron Rodgers and then Jordan Love for a little bit. Jalen Hurts goes out there and performs up to par. The run game goes for 363 yards. And then the next week against the Titans, you blow this team out of the water who's currently leading their division and is talked about as one of those teams that's a tough matchup because they always play physical and tough with their run game. And the Eagles answered that question for me of how I would feel going into this week over the last 3 weeks. And the reason, Patricia, is because if you looked at those first 10 games or so, the run game and run defense for that matter was extremely poor. But over the last 3 weeks, they've held Jonathan Taylor in check. A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones only went for a combined 102 yards. And then last week against Derrick Henry, you hold him to 30 yards. My biggest thing was we have to stop Saquon Barkley. We can't allow this guy who can break tackles. He's a decisive runner. He's going to make guys miss in the open field. Well, the Eagles have shored up their tackling concerns. They figured out to get the run defense going. Jordan Davis is now back, and nobody can pass on them the way that their cornerbacks are playing. So what is the hole for the Eagles? It's shooting themselves in the foot and getting behind the 8 ball. The only reason the Titans were in that game for a little bit at all last week is because the Eagles went crazy in penalties. They had about 6 penalties on their offensive line in the first quarter. They had 10 or 11 through the entire game. They put themselves behind the 8 ball. The way that you beat your division opponents is you play clean, sound, fundamental football. And your point to how will this team respond, I will just say this. The Eagles, they are like that vulture. They will circle you. And that moment that you slip up and you think everything is gone and you give up, that's when they're going to pounce. So if the Giants come out and show any bit of just, we're not playing 100% football, the Eagles will pounce on that. But it's the NFC East, and man, this could be a 13-10 game at the end because both teams have very good defensive lines. Both teams are very well coached with Brian Dable and Nick Sirianni. Funny enough, both of them are from Western New York, where both Lou and I are from as well. So we had the LockedOn Eagles and LockedOn Giants triangle all there in New York for a little bit. And now you got 2 guys that are good coaches in a position where they haven't been before. Brian Dable, first-year head coach, he has this team in a position to go to the playoffs, and the Eagles have arguably the best record that they've had in their franchise history. So for both teams, I feel like this is uncharted waters with the teams that they have in play, and I think the matchups that we're going to see on Sunday will be some fun ones that we'll get not just this Sunday, but for the next couple of years here in the NFC East.
Absolutely. The games between the Eagles and the Giants, always hard fought, always something funky happens. I don't know if you've
Always.
noticed that. There's always something unexpected, twice the Miracle of the Meadowlands, for example, the House of Horrors when the Giants go to the link. I mean, something always happens, which makes
Hmm.
this game fun. It's a fun rivalry. It can be a bitter one between fan bases, not only fan bases, but between the players. But, we're going to talk about some of the matchups in this next segment. We're going to take a quick break. We'll talk about the matchups to get you, to bring you a little closer to the action here on this crossover edition of the Locked On Giants and Locked On Eagles podcast. This episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we're sure you're going to love. That's why you'll be able to find Blocked Forever available as a bonus episode on Locked On NFL right now. Blocked Forever is a brand new podcast from former NFL All-Pro Ryan Khalil, who takes the conversation about football to the next level. Khalil sits down with star players, coaches, and former pros across the league to get real about what happens on the field and behind the scenes. New episodes of Blocked Forever will be recorded and released every week ahead of Thursday Night Football. So head on over to Locked On NFL right now for a sneak peek of Blocked Forever, or catch the full series available wherever you get your podcasts. Audible, get in the game. Thanks so much for making this edition of Crossover Thursday between the Locked On Giants podcast and Locked On Eagles podcast your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, everybody, welcome back to the crossover edition, Locked On Giants, Locked On Eagles. I'm Patricia Traina, host of Locked On Giants. He is Gino Cammilleri, co-host of Locked On Eagles. Check out his show, Giant Fans, with Louis. He co-hosts with Louis DiBiase. They do a great job over there. It won't kill you. I've checked it out. Trust me,
I
they do a
appreciate
great
that.
job. Nobody will revoke your membership card if you check them out.
No, you have to know your enemy and you have to be an informed football
Absolutely.
fan. You have to.
Absolutely. Not to mention you two are great guys. I mean, I'll
We
vouch for you.
appreciate that, Patricia.
We're family here at Locked On. So,
Especially in the
even
NFC East. We've all been
yes,
here for about 5 years now. It feels like it's like a family reunion almost when we do these
absolutely.
crossover shows. We're just saying, oh, how has your team been doing the last few weeks? And here we are once again, and I just can't get over. I know we're going to talk about the matchups, but Patricia, I know you've been following the NFC East way longer than I have. Is this as good as it's ever been for you? I mean, this is pretty impressive.
You'd have to go back to the 80s when some of those battles, I mean, like Giants, Washington, Dallas, Eagles, Dallas. Oh gosh, I'm thinking like the 80s when it was
I would have no idea.
Era. Well, I remember, so obviously I'm blaming myself, but trust me, those days, wow. I mean, that was some hard hitting, bone crunching football, and it was exciting to watch. And that's what this almost reminds me of. I mean, granted, it's a different era. There's more of an emphasis on, passing and the RPOs and all that good stuff. But the level of competition is probably just as intense, if not more intense, as it was back in those 80s when, the NFC East, like I said, they were the beast of the East. So, all right. And speaking of beasts and East, let's talk about key matchups. And Gino, I'm going to let you go first since you guys are the visitors.
Well, if you see over my shoulder here, for those watching on YouTube, I have a little duck. And there's a guy who was drafted from the Oregon Ducks over the last couple months here that wears number 5 for the New York Giants. I am absolutely terrified of what Kayvon Thibodeau can do, not just this Sunday, but how good he can be as a pass rusher moving forward. I want to know, how good is Kayvon Thibodeau right now? And can he have a chance to be the first player in nearly 2.5 seasons to get a sack on Lane Johnson? Because if there was ever a type of player that give Lane fits, it's somebody with long arms that has crazy good athleticism and is just quick twitch. And Kayvon Thibodeau is all that. I'm terrified of what he can do containing Jalen Hurts, getting into the backfield. Just how good has this young man been this year?
And he has certainly been playing really well these last couple of weeks. He might not have the sacks to show for it, but he has been a disruptive force getting into the backfield, getting pressures, getting hits, forcing the quarterback off his spot. Thibodeau is turning into everything they thought he would be. And just think, once he learns more counter moves, he's going to become even that more dangerous, I think, and that more of a pest for offensive lines to handle. So definitely a good matchup there to keep an eye on for the Eagles. For the Giants, I'm going to mention a couple here, and one of which I'm going to mention is outside the box. And you actually touched upon it in the last segment. The battle of wits between Nick Sirianni and Brian Daboll. Both of them, I think it was 2012, they were on the Kansas City Chiefs staff. I believe Romeo Crennel was the head coach at the time. Both offensive assistants. Daboll was the offensive coordinator for a year, and Sirianni was, I believe, the receivers coach. And I did a story for Giants Country on Fan Nation, part of SI, about that relationship. And Sirianni was talking about how he's learned so much from Daboll in that 1 year, especially when it comes to receivers and offense and defense and how to, thwart the defense. And I'm thinking to myself, oh boy, I could just imagine what those conversations were like and how Sirianni might be planning to use all that information now against the Giants. So I thought that was kind of an outside the box type of matchup. Even though Daboll doesn't call the plays, he obviously has final say over that stuff. But from a gridiron perspective, the thing that I'm curious to see is going to be the Giants' running game. Now, the Giants' running game has had its moments where it's looked really good and it's had its slumps. And I went back and I took a look at some of the games that the Eagles have played where they allowed more than 100 yards total rushing to opponents. So against Arizona, 124, Houston, I think was 168, Washington, 152, Dallas, 134. Even though they won all those games except for the Washington game, the games were close. So sure enough, I'm sitting there and I'm saying to myself, if the Giants can get the running game going, and not just by Saquon Barkley, but also by Daniel Jones, get that running game going, get over 100 yards, maybe, just maybe, this game won't be the big blowout that the odds makers seem to think it's going to be.
I would have to say that is exactly what the last 3 teams, the last 3 weeks probably were thinking as well. With Jonathan Taylor, if we can just keep him hot, if we can just keep that run game going with a good offensive line in Indianapolis. And then with Green Bay, I mean, those 2 guys in A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones are bona fide superstars at this point in what they can do. The Eagles held them in check. And then last week I thought was the icing on the cake. You talk about, can they get this going with the guy who is the focal point, with the quarterback who does have some maneuverability? I will say Daniel Jones has given them a lot of fits in the run game. It is definitely a concern because when the Eagles are in the open field, tackling isn't their greatest thing. They've been better on it. They've been better in pursuit. They brought more juice to getting to the football, capping off tackles. But what will be the ultimate decider is the trench game. And bringing it all back to Nick Sirianni and Brian Daboll, you could take away that these 2 guys build these offenses in very similar lights. They're going to allow their offensive line to be fun, flowing, creative, open up holes for a runner in Saquon Barkley, who was the guy ahead of Miles Sanders. That's why it's always another cool matchup that these guys have such a cool personal relationship as well, and are both playing arguably the best seasons of their career and have both been the focal points of their offense, and as well as had quarterbacks who have taken that leap. Daniel Jones looks exceptionally better in the tape that I've seen of him over the last couple years. Jalen Hurts, very similar. He's taken that jump in completion percentage, touchdowns, taking care of the football. Both of these guys are athletes. Both of these guys have playmakers. It comes down to who controls the trenches. Because if the Eagles' defensive line can keep that Giants' offensive line from getting that push, it'll be a lot tougher than it was against Tennessee. I think the guys on the line for the Giants, I mean, when you have guys like John Feliciano that are setting the tone for them, that's exactly who you want. You got big physical guys that can impose their will over guys like Jordan Davis, which is tough, and Javon Hargrave. And can you control the middle of the offensive line for 60 minutes? Because the Eagles' defensive line can do that, and they've done it in the past. Now, if you do get it going, Saquon is probably going to be the hardest running back that you have to take down in the open field when it comes to yards after contact. If they get it going and they have a great day, Patricia, I could see a perfect day from the Giants being 200 yards on the ground. The Eagles will let you run. They don't want you to pass, but you can run all day long. And the reason they're close is because they do those bend, don't break style games where you can run for all these yards. We'll let you get into the red zone, but if we keep you out of the end zone with least amount of explosive plays as possible between the 20s, that's been their formula to win. So just keep going for the Eagles is really what it comes down to.
So basically, that's going to feed right into the Giants' wheelhouse because it's interesting. I know the Eagles signed Ndamukong Suh to kind of shore up that run defense that had some struggles there. But the Giants, you mentioned, let them run and just don't let them pass. Giants receivers, I don't know if you've taken a look at them. Right now, their number one receiver is Darius Slayton, a guy who we didn't even think was going to be on this team. And if Kenny Golladay, Sterling Shepard had worked out, Darius Slayton probably wouldn't be a number one receiver. You look at the other receivers, Richie James, David Sills, Marcus Johnson, Isaiah Hodgkins. These are all guys that, I question if they would actually be on the roster if it wasn't for the dire straits or the mash unit that the Giants have at receiver. So the thing that concerns me most about, the Giants and their running game is what you brought up, the battle in the trenches and the interior of that offensive line. Let's just say I've seen them play better because the second level blocking by the Giants offensive line has not really been as effective as it was earlier in the season. Now, I don't know if it's because of injuries and messing up the chemistry between guys. I don't know if guys are just banged up and just not getting the push that they were. But the Giants have had trouble at the second level. And I forget the number was. I looked it up. It's on Giants country. But the Giants have been stuffed a lot at the line of scrimmage with their running game. So they got to get it going. This would be a good week for them to really break out and just, sock it and punch the Eagles in the mouth. But you know what? The Eagles have a tough defensive front. Fletcher Cox, Sue, like I mentioned, that defense scares me. Plus, they've got some linebackers who can actually come up and fill holes. So that's going to be a really, really difficult matchup for the Giants.
The winner of this football game will inevitably probably have to run for at least 150 yards. I think on both sides of the football, you're going to have to set up the run game. It won't be as easy for the Eagles to pass as it was last week, and it won't be as easy for them to run the football as it was 2 weeks ago. So balance. I think which team can find the most balance, and like you said, the Eagles have those playmakers that the Giants don't have on the outside right now. So that balance can come for the Eagles. And if it's anything like last week for Tennessee, where as soon as Treylon Burks went out, Darius Slay and James Bradbury completely shut down the game for the rest of the outside corners, that's the worst case scenario for the Giants to get into. It's just dangling the little bit of cheese for the mouse. Like, yes, try and run the football, try to set up the pass, because once you do that and we could get comfortable, our linebackers can come up. We're going to spill everything outside. We're going to fill gaps. Oh, and our corners, they like to tackle as well. Everybody on this team the last couple weeks has done the job of a true top-level defense. They fly to the football. There's multiple hats on hats when the ball is getting tackled, and everybody ends up on the pile. They weren't doing that in those games that you talked about, and I think the Washington one is the embodiment of the worst-case scenario. So it's a double-edged sword. If you play a great game, you get the result that you've gotten over the last couple weeks in the first 10 before that, and if not, doomsday. It was Washington. That was the worst case. And Saquon could absolutely do that because you have him twice. And you also have Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard to take care of, and Justin Fields in a couple weeks, and Elvin Kamara. This just doesn't stop for the Eagles. Maybe this is the one where there's just too much water for the dam to hold, and it finally breaks.
Well, if it's going to break, I know Giant fans are hoping it breaks this week because they're coming to MetLife Stadium.
Mhm.
Giant fans would love nothing better than to take it to the Eagles on their home turf. And speaking of which, we're going to take our final break here on this crossover edition of the Locked On Giants and Locked On Eagles podcast. When we come back, we're going to talk predictions and then we're going to just wrap it up. Don't go anywhere, everybody. This episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game, both college and NFL. And BetOnline doesn't stop there. It's your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including NBA, NHL, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head on over to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the games start. This episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by Built. If you haven't tried Built Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. These marshmallow-like puffs are covered in real milk chocolate, and they melt in your mouth. They come in different flavors and are low in sugar and carbs and high in protein. What's also great about Built Puffs is that all of their bars are made with collagen protein, which provides tons of health benefits. So eat something that tastes good and is good for you. Visit Built.com and put your customized box together today. Use promo code LOCKEDON15 to get 15% off your first order. That's Built.com, promo code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off your first order. All right, everybody, welcome back to the crossover edition of Locked On Giants, Locked On Eagles. I'm Patricia Traina, host of Locked On Giants. He is Gino Cammilleri, co-host of Locked On Eagles. And we're just mixing it up. Always great to see Gino on the other side of the screen. And Gino, here's a part of the show that I know I'm not a big fan of, but they asked us to do it. I haven't gotten it right yet. Prediction time. And I get the impression that you're a little bit more optimistic about the score than I am. So let's hear what you have to say first.
It's not a biased optimism. It's an optimism of proving me wrong. And every time I say, all right, they're going to prove me wrong this week. They're going to prove me wrong this week. Well, they've proven me wrong, and they've done everything that I expected them not to do. I didn't expect them to go on this run. I didn't expect Jalen Hurts to take that leap. I didn't expect the defense to settle in as well as they have. I thought this was a team that could be a 3 or 4 seed. I never thought they could be that number 1 seed. That is the most important thing, and that's what makes this game so important, is that 1 seed. To see how close Minnesota is, to see how close the Cowboys are in this conference right now. The Eagles can't slip up. And division games, they count as 2 wins in my book. You hand a loss to a division opponent, and you get that win. It's a 2-game swing. And for the Eagles, if they prove me wrong once again, they're going to do it by stopping the run. They're going to do it by having a good, sound offensive performance, not shooting themselves in the foot, not taking dumb, unnecessary penalties. Because if they do that, I believe that the Giants will come out on top of this game. It could be a 2017 game in favor of the Giants. But Jalen Hurts is playing at an MVP caliber level right now. Nick Sirianni has his team juiced to a level that I never saw even Doug Peterson get this team to. This is a game that is huge. It should have been circled way before this season started, especially in this 3-game road stand you have now. You're playing the Giants, you're playing the Bears, you're playing Dallas. You need this game. It might sound crazy that a 1-loss team needs to win this football game. I think the Eagles continue to stay hot. I think it's 31-22, 31-22 Philadelphia Eagles. I think the Giants will put some points on them. I think it'll be close, and then the Eagles will do what they've done in the fourth quarter nearly every single game and just open this thing up and maybe win by 2 scores.
Okay, all right. You're kind of in the ballpark that I was thinking, but I just want to point out the last 2 years, the Giants and Eagles have split. And the Giants rosters the last 2 years have left something to be desired.
Mhm.
Now, that being said, this year's roster, they have some good players on it, but there are positions in which they are weak. And Giant fans, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the receivers. I'm talking about offensive line. The linebackers. How are they going to cover those RPOs that Philly seems to love to run, all the time? There are some question marks. I see this Eagles team, and gosh, it pains me to say this, but I got to give credit where it's due. This is a loaded team. They have so much better talent right now than the Giants do in certain areas, certain key areas. And I think that, I just don't see the Giants pulling this one out. I think if they do, it's going to be because the Eagles make mistakes and the Giants capitalize on them. But otherwise, I think this is going to be 33. I'm going to go 33-17 Eagles. I don't even know that the Giants are going to be able to score 20 points.
Wow.
So I think this is going to be a little wider gap here. I hope I'm wrong, but the last few weeks, it's funny. In writing the post-game scripts and everything like that, I've had to go back and forth and change stuff. I have a feeling this week my job's going to be a little easier because I think I'm going to be able to say Eagles have a comfortable lead. I hope I'm wrong because, like I said, the last 2 years the Giants have split with the Eagles. They've won the game at home. They've lost it at the link. Giants are just too banged up. I do think Brian Daboll, though, will have them ready to play. I think, the attitude will be good. The energy will be good. I just don't think they have the juice to cross the finish line. Sorry, Giant fans.
They were her words, not mine. I think the Eagles have to win this one. But at the end of the day, the state that this division is in, I've said it multiple times on my show, the coaches, the personnel, it is only going to get better over the next couple of years. This division is going to be as competitive as any division in football, and that should make Eagles fans, Giants fans, Washington fans, and Cowboys fans that much happier. Because if they can get back to those years where the whole league runs through the NFC East, it's going to be very fun for us covering it here on the LockedOn Podcast Network for the next couple of years.
Yes, and to that point, Giant fans, it's going to get even better for the Giants. Give Joe Shane a healthy salary cap, which he will have next year. He'll have multiple draft picks. I think he's going to have something like 11 or maybe even 13 by the time it's all said and done. This team is on the upswing. They've got a lot of solid core pieces now. They now know what they need, what direction to go in. They'll have a full off season to work on it. It's not like, Shane's coming in at the end of January and then Daboll's coming in the end of January. And now, oh, by the way, the coaching staff isn't complete until February. It's going to get better, Giant fans. I just don't know that, this is the week that we're going to be able to sit here and say, yay, upset. Hopefully, though, I'm wrong, though. Usually, it's funny. Sometimes when I pick against the Giants, they surprise me. So we'll see. We'll see. So
it should be fun. It should
yes,
be fun.
Yes, it should. Sure. So just to wrap up real quick, Giants and Eagles at MetLife Stadium, 1:00 on Sunday. The Eagles at stake have they can clinch a playoff berth. They're going to win the NFC East. I mean, who's going to catch them at this point?
Don't jinx them. Don't jinx them. Cowboys are right there.
Well, listen, pick your poison if you're in the Giants camp.
Absolutely.
But yeah, at stake, 11-1 for the Eagles. They can improve to 12-1, lock up a playoff berth. The Giants also in the playoff hunt. They're holding on to a wild card seed, but they've got Seattle and Washington nipping at their heels. Washington has the bye. Seattle has tiebreaker over the Giants. Giants got to win. So, we are now, every game's a must win, but now in these last few weeks, every game is especially a big must win. So who's going to come out on top? We're going to find out. And as always, on the LockedOn Giants podcast and on the LockedOn Eagles podcast, we will bring you complete coverage afterwards. So make sure you tune in to our respective shows. We want to thank you all for coming out and checking us out here on this crossover edition of Locked On Giants, Locked On Eagles. For Gino Cammilleri, I'm Patricia Traina. Everybody have a wonderful, wonderful day.